Welcome to episode 6 of Talkin with Turpin. Pleased to have you with us today. I am super excited about our conversation today. Today's like coming back home. As many of you know, before I became commissioner, I had the real privilege of being on the East Allen County School Board and getting to know my two guests today really well. Superintendent Marilyn Hissong. I'm happy to have you with us, Marilyn. And the CFO for East Allen County, Pat McKeon. Pat, welcome here.
Thank you.
So really excited about our conversation today. As you all know, education is a big piece of quality of place. Having good schools, schools that are helping our children learn and grow for the future are a critical piece of the success story of Allen County. And I think East Allen County Schools, obviously I'm biased and I'm a big fan, but I think they're doing it as better or as well or better than anybody else is. So excited to have the conversation today and talk about a number of topics. So we'll kick it off. Marilyn, you are a product of East Allen County. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Okay, well, I'm a Woodland High School graduate. I won't tell what year, but I went from
2 years ago.
Yeah, there you go. I would tell you, I went to Ball State University, did my undergrad, came back, did my student teaching right away at New Haven Elementary at the time. Went on to do my teaching at Village Elementary, and I was a coach for volleyball at Paul Harding Junior High. Well, at that time it was high school. Now it's Paul Harding Junior High. And after that, I became a principal, and I was at Monroeville, and then Highland Terrace, and then Hoagland Elementary. From there, I was tapped again to continue in the progression, and I became director of curriculum. And while I was director of curriculum, we had a short period of time where we needed a New Haven middle school principal. So I also took on that role for about 8 to 10 weeks. And then assistant superintendent. And after that became superintendent. And this is my 9th year as superintendent. And it's 33 years in East Allen County Schools. But my whole life has been here. And I can't think of a better place I'd like to live.
So, yeah, fun fact, Marilyn is the longest serving superintendent in Allen County, as well as 2023, our superintendent of the year for Indiana. So we were really pleased with that. A couple of things to talk about, Pat, is that, one of the biggest issues that I hear as commissioner is property taxes, right? Is that, a lot of people have questions on the assessed valuation. Obviously, the legislature made some changes this year to property taxes and the formula. One of the things I learned as a school board member is that the funding formula for schools is pretty complicated. And so one of the fun facts for you, Pat, is that you came through the education system, but you focused your doctoral work really on school finance, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So how has that been helpful? Walk us through kind of how our schools are funded today in the state of Indiana.
Well, back to the doctoral thesis, what I ended up doing my doctoral thesis on was a look at the assessed value for 290 school corporations within Indiana over a 5-year span. And I compared what the assessed value was to the starting teacher salary for each of those, because a lot of people have that assumption. But after learning more about it, you understand that the funding is coming through tuition and it's coming through the student count. We're very fortunate in East Allen to have a pretty good student count. We had 933 students come from other school districts to come and had chose East Allen County Schools this year. We just had our student count at the beginning of October. But as far as the property tax goes, we just actually took a look at some of the history of the past 10 years with property tax in East Allen County, and we've seen a jump. 2 years ago, our net assessed value increased by over 17%, followed by 10%, followed by 11% this past year. For 2026 coming up, it's going to be at about a 4.8% growth. And a lot of the stuff is coming because the Senate enrolled Act 1, the homestead credits, and the way that bill is set up, it's going to get rid of the standard deduction for homeowners, increase the supplemental with the big intent of, as if you're a homeowner, hopefully you're going to be seeing less property taxes go. But if you're on the flip side of that and you're a school and you're dependent upon those property tax, a lot of that money that you would have assumed is not going to be received because of the property tax limits that were established with Mitch Daniels in around 2008, 2009. So you may or may not know that the current way it's set up is that homeowners are only going to be taxed at 1% of their gross assessed value. And with these increased deductions and credits, that Senate Enrolled Act 1, we're probably going to be losing from our certified rate, roughly $5 million for each consecutive year until about 2031. So when you're dealing with a property tax revenue of, say, 22 million and you take 5, it's a pretty large percentage. So that's just one of the factors that we're currently working through.
So let's unpack that a little bit, because there's a lot there.
Yep.
And most of our people are like, so in the state of Indiana today, a number of years ago, the state kind of took over the funding of education. And so the state portion of this from income taxes is focused on education. So the state looks at the number of students you have. So you mentioned the student count day, right?
Yes.
We have a date in October and a day, I think, in February, that the state looks at and says, how many students does a school corporation have? And so East Allen's got a little over 10,000, right? Or somewhere around there.
We're at 9,949.24 this year. Know that to a T. So we're down about 63 kids.
Well, and one of the things that's interesting is that number changes daily, right? That was a surprise to me as a board member, is that you think that number is fairly static. However, especially in a lot of our schools, our students are transient, right? You have families that may be moving from apartment to apartment, and so those kids may be in one school one day and another school next week, and then they may come back. And so the state uses 2 days a year to look at count, because that count also does change wildly over the course of that time. So in this case, 9,900 students that we have, the state has a formula in place that says we look at that count and we give so much money per student. But then on top of that, that's one piece, but then there's additions on top of that, isn't there, Pat?
That's correct.
There's an addition for special education.
Yep.
And I think the statistic for East Allen is 10% of the students roughly at East Allen County schools have some kind of special need. And so because of that, that adds an additional piece on, because it's expensive,
Yep.
to do that.
And I actually think we're closer to 20%.
Okay. So
Yes.
that's a number that keeps,
Yes.
because one of the things, I think, is it a fair thing to say that even for families that may choose to send their children to another school. So if I send my child to a private school and use my voucher for that, I may have another child that has special needs that would stay with the public school, because a lot of our private schools do not have the infrastructure to do that, right? So that's another thing that has to be factored in. So there's an addition for that.
Mm-hmm.
There's also an addition for if you have a certain number of students that have free and reduced lunches, right? Those that have economic disparity, because again, our studies tell us that it takes more intervention usually for those families that do not have the same financial means as others. So it's a complicated formula, but the state looks at your numbers, and then based on the complexity of what that district is, they put some additions in that. So, but the state has limitations, right, on that. So the state would say, okay, East Allen, you've got 9,900 students, and you've got this many that have special needs, this many that are free and reduced lunches. And so, oh, yes, English is a second language. That's another huge one. I mean, Marilyn, tell us a little bit about that, because East Allen is unique. Allen County is the largest geographic county in the state of Indiana, 660 square miles. But Marilyn, you represent half of that,
Right.
over 300 square.
344.
Yeah. And so it's a district also that looks very different, right? I live up in the Leo area, which looks some certain way. We're here in New Haven today, which looks a different way. If we go over to Woodland, that looks a little different. We go to Heritage looks different, and then go down to the Harding area and Southwick area looks very different. In that Harding Southwick area, tell us the statistics about what that EL looks like.
Well, this year we hit over 70% EL. We have a 71% EL population at Southwick Elementary. We've always maintained they're in the 60s somewhere, and this is the first year we've crept over that 60% at Southwick. PCA is roughly around 66%, and then Paul Harding has maybe they're in the 50s, somewhere around there. But I would tell you, huge Burmese population in our district, and our students that stay with us through East Allen University, like if they are in that track and they go to East Allen University, we have a high percentage of Burmese students at East Allen University. And if they spend the time with us and go all the way through, they matriculate through the system, we have a very high success rate with them at East Allen University. We are at 100% graduation rate there. And usually we're in the 80s or close to 90 for associate's degrees. So they're getting both when they leave there, and our EL students are doing very well. We just have to keep them with us long enough.
You know, it's interesting when we talk about East Allen University, I think is one of the unsung gems of Allen County. And it was actually, you and I were at an event last week, and I grabbed you, the governor was there, and I was talking up East Allen University and said, you know, Governor, this is something you need to see, and invited him to come back and take a look at that because, you know, here we have a population that 70%, a lot of them first generation, they've come here from Myanmar, you know, escaping, you know, what's going on there, but also a lot of Hispanic population and some other areas. Most don't know English when they come into our schools. We have a great teaching staff there that really pour into these kids and invest in them. We know that within 2 to 3 years, we can get them proficient by working with them. But then talk a little bit about East Allen University, the structure of that, because we don't have anything else like it in Allen County. I don't know that we have a lot like it in the state of Indiana, but it's a success story that we've been able to really take what could be an at-risk population and really give them some critical life skills.
Yeah, and it's like you said, they're first generation. Many of them are first generation college students. But I think even more so, they walk across the stage and literally we have a high school diploma in one hand and you have an associate's degree in the other hand. And I think to those families, that's life-changing. And our kids that are there can also opt to go to the Career Center. So they can actually end up with associate's degree, a high school diploma, and some credentials at the Career Center on top of it. So those students are really getting a leg up during their high school period of time before they even decide what exactly they want to do with their life. If it's college or if it's going into a trade, whatever that option is, it's wide open to them. It's just giving them so many more possibilities and opportunities that they may not have had at a traditional high school. So we partner with Vincennes University, and that's who our associate's degree is through. But I will tell you, probably the most monumental thing for me is graduation day, when you see them all sitting out there and you see the diversity of the population of students. But then watching the parents, I mean, I see the tears of moms and dads because it's like their kid has an associate's degree, and that's more than they had probably ever anticipated themselves getting in many cases. But they know it's life-changing for their family.
Yeah. Well, at East Allen University, I mean, it really is college. I mean, they structure that, you know, in those 4 years of high school, it is structured like college. And so, you know, any child who lives in the district could go there. We have a cap of how many, because again, you know, you have teachers that are certified. They can teach either college or high school. And this really is a nice blend. And so think about that. You have a student who's getting out of high school with their diploma in one hand and their associates in another, and they've already got a leg up.
Yeah.
And it costs that family how much?
Zero.
Yeah.
I mean, they aren't paying for anything. I mean, that's the beauty of it. But think about the money they're saving if
Yes.
a kid goes on to college. I mean, that's 2 years that they've already, I mean, in many cases, they take those, all of the universities in Indiana, we have a reciprocal process. So they take all of those credits. But to be honest with you, we've gone in Ohio, Michigan, and different states as well, and they've accepted the VU credits. So we have not had any issues with that at all thus far.
Yeah. And I mean, as Marilyn said earlier, we were telling the governor, I mean, it is darn close to 100% graduation. And so imagine that you've got 100% graduation, and the vast majority of those children coming out have their associates. And, you know, when you've got 100 kids in a graduating class, if you have one or two that don't, it skews you from 100, right? But it's an amazing success story. And by the way, it doesn't cost the taxpayers of Allen County any additional money, because we're using what our normal allocation is for education from the state. And then Vincennes helps, you know, chip in some of the others because of their funding formulas as well. So it's a great partnership that I don't think we talk enough about. I think when I tell people about it, they're stunned because they just don't. It also shows a way that really our public schools are innovating today, that those public schools that want to thrive in the future are going to have to think outside the box, and East Allen's doing that. So talking about that, we'll go back to the funding formula a little bit. So the state has an amount they give per student, and that base formula right now is what, $7,500, somewhere in there?
6,700 per student, and then they add the complexity formula, which is based upon low economic status, based upon SNAP, TANF, and foster care from 2 years ago. And that's going to give you your base account allocation. From there, to piggyback off of the East Allen University, the state does incentivize school corporations to earn or to offer dual credit as well as the associate's degree. So there's an academic performance grant that would also be on top of that, as well as the special education, the career and technical grant, and the non-English speaking grant. And so all those grants combined pretty much are determined by the number of students enrolled in each of the specific programs or qualifications. And then we get monthly disbursements primarily for the purpose of using them for instructional needs.
Yeah. So the state does that, but the state, however, has limitations on how they can be spent, correct?
Correct.
That money is spent really for our teaching staff. And so, the education that happens in the classroom, those costs outside of that, the buildings that we have, the upkeep on those buildings, the buses, all of those pieces are what are paid for by property taxes.
Correct.
And so as we talk about SB1 and you talk about, people see their assessed valuation and, my house went up 10% this year, let's say. The school doesn't get 10% more money. There are caps on that the state has. It's based on what the levy looks like, and then the state has a cap of how much of that levy you can get. And so the challenge for a school corporation out of an SB1 is that because of the credits that are in there and some of the additional caps that are put in, it reduces over time, or it slows down the amount of money you're going to get from the property taxes. And so, for example, if you get maybe the same amount of property tax revenue next year that you got this year, well, that sounds fine. However, when you look at how much does it cost us to do utilities for our schools, we have 15 schools for Allen County, East Allen.
Buildings.
Okay.
17 buildings, 17 rooftops, 17 asphalts. So we're paying we're well into the millions for utility costs because of all of that. And so we're using property tax to funnel that. And to your point on the levy, just because the property taxes go up, the state legislature determines what schools can increase per year for operational expense. And right now that maximum levy is set at 4%. So if we got $1 this last year, we'd only get $1.04 next year. So it's going to be limited to whatever they choose at the General Assembly. And that really is kind of what we need to work with within our means.
Well, and it's not schools. Again, so many things are outside the control, right? You have the cost of gas goes up for the school buses or diesel. And so that's got to be factored in. And utilities, for all of our watchers on this, everyone knows the utility costs have been skyrocketing, right? So when that happens, or building cost, as you have 17 buildings, you've got to do improvements and adjustments over time, right, of that. And so those all cost more. So as there are the constraints on that, and I think this school corporation, I know this the best, right, has done a really good job of living within what we have. But there's also ways we have to look at, how do we look at alternative revenue streams, right, when that happens. So what are some of the things, Pat, that, in a financial reality that any school has that a person in your job is trying to do to say, okay, how can we make the money stretch as far as possible?
So outside of that, we use debt or bonds to finance some of the projects that don't pertain to operational expenses. What is allowed is basically a general obligation bond, and that can be used for multiple purposes, however it's defined by legal bond counsel. And then beyond that, and that would be to the maximum of about $6 million at the most that we could do. Beyond that, you could do more bonds, but you'd have to use a building core to issue those bonds, and you could do a petition remonstrance up to probably $12 million or so. And then beyond that, you'd need to do a referendum where you need taxpayer input in order to vote, determining whether or not they would like to see these projects go forward.
And on the referendums, there's two kinds that you can do. You can do either a capital one.
Technically three.
Okay.
You can do safety, you can do operating, or you can do capital.
So in each of those, so for example, the one most people see, and it's usually the biggest dollars, is usually some kind of capital one, right?
Correct.
You see that, a number of schools locally, I know that, if when you look at Southwest Allen, when they did additions onto Homestead and built that out, they did a referendum for it, right? Because the cost is so much that it takes that. for operating. Northwest Allen is doing one this year for that. East Allen's not went down that path thus far on that, correct? Because the challenge with that is that if you get it, it provides money for a time, but then it expires at some point, right?
It does.
And so it's a challenge to kind of budget for that when you may not know that's there. And then the third type, as you said, Pat, is that safety one, right? If we need to do, which I think Fort Wayne Community Schools did several years ago, right? If there's safety measures that you want to do for a school. And I think East Allen has done a lot of that using, different financing to do it without going for a referendum on that. So those are things that the legislature gives as tools for that could be there. Explain a little bit. This school corporation has chosen not to go down the path of referendums, but instead, does do general obligation bonds periodically. And some people may think, well, that's for fluff or something like that. Walk us through, Pat, what are some of the things that a school corporation would do a general obligation bond for?
So up until this past year, we've limited their uses for general obligation bonds strictly to roofing, masonry, HVAC, and asphalt. And that's been our primary drive. But because of the implications of Senate Enrolled Act 1, where we're going to be losing a lot of the property tax revenue to the operating costs, what we've chosen to do with this latest round of bond is to purchase technology, which we'd normally purchase with our operations fund, buses, again, which we normally purchase through operating funds, and buses, capital, and our regular capital projects, like our smaller building, like window replacement, carpet replacement, and a lot of those other projects that are typically done through the capital projects. So what we're basically doing is taking expenses that were previously paid for out of the operations fund, and we're transferring that over to the debt service fund, and we're using our bonds in order to pay for a lot of these, because our revenue is, again, limited by the General Assembly, and we still have operating needs within the district. Now, you could say you could take that all the way you wanted and continue to jack up the tax rate by continuing to take out bonds, but what Senate Enrolled Act 1 does is it takes a look at your debt service tax rate, and that's the tax rate that's just established for your debt service fund. And if you surpass that tax rate beyond 70 cents, then every single project that you do, even if it's for, and I'll use an extreme example, $1, you're going to have to do a referendum in order to get that $1. So what you don't want to do is increase your debt service tax rate beyond 70 cents and lock yourself into waiting for an even numbered year for a November election to ask the taxpayers if they want to pay, because if you have a chiller that goes out for HVAC, that's going to be fairly problematic. So we have to manage our debt service tax rate and maintain that well, and it's currently in about 50, 55, and 54, and we have to keep that down. And with these property tax deductions, the net assessed value is going to go down, and just by the nature of the calculation, our tax rate, including our debt service, will go up without taking on any additional dollars. So our tax rate will go up. We know that, even if we don't take out any additional dollars because of the deductions and credits from Senate Enrolled Act 1. But on top of that, since we're transferring a lot of the expenses from the operations fund over to the debt service, we also have to manage that debt service tax rate to ensure that we stay away from that 70 cents, knowing that we're going to have additional deductions the following 5 years, so that we don't lock ourselves into a position to where if we needed additional dollars for somewhat of an emergency, we would not put ourselves in a predicament that would keep us from providing a solution to that problem.
Yeah, so I mean, to boil that down, I think it is someone that's in your type of role is constantly trying to look at how do we keep our tax rate as low as possible, while at the same token, just providing the operations it takes to run, 17 buildings and those pieces that are there. And I always tell people that, taxes are high. I think we all would agree with that, and we wish they were lower. When you look at school corporations throughout the state of Indiana, the rate for East Allen County is under $1 that's there, which I know our board was really strong on doing that. a lot of the school corporations around the Annapolis area, whether it's the Carmels or the Noblesville, all those are well over $1.20 plus. And so, really the schools, in
And the
North,
state average is closer to $1.03.
right. So, I mean, really, I think a lot of the schools in Northeast Indiana have tried their best to really try to keep that rate as absolutely low as possible. But what I hear you saying, Pat, is, there's trade-offs in every piece of legislation done, right? And so the legislature makes some tweaks in this, and you will have a lowering of your property tax bill. However, it may result in a higher rate too, because of the way that everything works. You'll see automatically some of these fees go up. So it's complicated, and it's not, I know from firsthand knowledge, it's not the schools saying, okay, we want all kinds of new stuff. It really is just the operational cost of running, an operation. A lot of these schools, I know in my area, our elementary school was built in the 30s, right? Our high school was built, in the 50s, the 70s, and the 90s. And so with that, you've got things that happen, right? Chillers go out, roofs go bad. And so how do you pay for those things? So it's definitely a challenge, knowing all those pieces. Moving kind of out of finance to just general education, right? You've been involved in it for 30 years. You've been in this district for that whole time. How has it changed, and what does the future look like?
I think probably the biggest change is the career pathways. Because I think back to when we were in school, there definitely was some of that going on. Like we had a print shop out at Woodland, and so students were doing some of that then. But now with the internship requirement and the graduation pathways, while I think all of these things are great, it is a lot to manage, and you need more people because you have to keep track of everything in a different way. So that is always a balance, because we're trying to staff within our means, but you have people that are, they're definitely working a lot of extra hours. But I would also tell you, do I see it being good for kids? Absolutely. I think the career pathways has been enlightening to some of our students. It's giving them opportunities to test pilot, I guess is a way to put it. They can try something out, see if they like it. If they don't, they're not paying for college a couple of years down the road and then deciding they don't like it. So that's been nice. That has been a huge change. How we assess kids is very different from when we would have been back in school. My days, we didn't have all these state assessments the way they are now. So that's been huge. The iRead 3 test, I'm happy with East Allen's growth in that area. I do think it's important that students learn to read. I think the biggest hurdle for us in East Allen is the EL students, because learning a language that quickly and being able to take it in an assessment that is formative register, because tests are written in a formal register, that is very difficult for our EL students. And I'm not saying they can't do it, because I do believe they can do it. It's just going to take them time. It's going to take them more time than it would your traditional student. And they will get there, though. I have no doubt. And we are adamant about making and ensuring that they do. It's just takes time. So I think those are some of the biggest, but like the career technical education program, like our career center is amazing. And I love watching our kids over there, the hands-on activities they're doing, the internships that's creating, and the businesses that are coming to life within our communities has been huge. And I just have to give a huge shout out for those businesses, because without our communities, I don't know how we would even be able to meet the credentials that we need to right now for the career pathways that we have to create. But our businesses are coming out and they are supporting us, and I'm very grateful for that. We just have a lot of opportunities for our students in that regard.
Yeah, one of the things that, as a school board member during COVID, interesting time, right? And that was when we kind of came back to normal classes and the mask off and all of that, we saw there were a number, especially our little ones, there were a lot of challenges. Can you walk through what some of those are and how we're still addressing those today?
I would say it was mainly the social stuff. We just saw a lot of students that didn't have the opportunity to socialize with other kids, and that was probably the huge thing when we came back in. It was like, how do we do school again? Because we were so used to being out and not around other students, and how we treat our classmates and the respect for adults. And so we had to revisit a lot of that. I will tell you, it's going back the other direction now. We're getting closer to that. But a lot of those youngsters, I mean, that were born during COVID are now our kindergarten, first grade students. And so, we're looking at them, and they are coming back through. But I will tell you, the reading and the math, and this was a statewide thing, you would see that during that time, our scores definitely dipped. And I think that was across the state. But I will tell you, I think we're coming out of that trend now. I think experiences for kids in an environment where they can thrive is always going to be the best place for them. And while we have a lot of virtual learning going on during that time, I still think students being in person, for the majority of students, I will tell you, is always going to be the best thing, just because of the socialization that they can get. And it's just like, you learn so much from other people's communication and their conversations that you have with people. I never stop learning. I mean, anytime you're in a room, you're talking to other people, great ideas can percolate up. And I think that's huge to remember. We need each other. And I think in East Allen, that is so prevalent, because we are, even though we're huge, we're still very small because of each small community. And we really take care of each other. And I think that's important. And I think everybody wants what's best for our kids. And we live every day that way. Just what is best for our students, and the decisions we make have to be, the kids always have to be our first priority. It's our future.
What do you see as, so looking out this year, next year, what are some of the biggest challenges? Because your role, I told a couple of legislators when I was still a school board member, I think, and I was a corporate CFO, had, $1 billion company, 5,000 employees. You worked harder than I did. And, one of the hardest jobs, I think, in the state of Indiana is yours, of being a public school superintendent, just because of all the constituencies you've got to have, right? You have your teachers, and you have your school board, and you have the public, and you have, students, and you've got elected officials, and you have all these different parties that, everyone thinks they can do your job better than you are, and, how you can do things better. And it's a lot. I'll sing your praises and you do it really well. But what are some of these biggest challenges that you see in the future?
All right. If I tongue in cheek it a little bit and have fun, I would tell you delays and cancellations in this district are horrendous. Only because we're so big, and we have fog out in Monroeville, Hoagland, but then you see none of it in the rest of the district. And so you have all the parents in Leo and Woodland and New Haven going, "What are you thinking, Mrs. Hissong? Why are you calling a delay?" But it's so bad in one of our attendance areas. And you have to realize we cross so many boundaries in this district. Like for our career center, they have to drive up to New Haven, and that's students driving, but it's also bus transportation. So you're coming out of the Hoagland area, so you have that fog. And so we have special education programs that, go across the district. And so the decisions we make can't just be for one attendance area. It has to be for the whole district when we make that decision. So as I tongue in cheek that, I always pray every night usually that we have no fog or no snow at this point. We don't need it yet, but I will tell you, I'm happy when we get up in the morning and I don't see any fog.
Well, because the biggest issue on that really is always kids' safety, right?
It is. Always.
Because we do what? I mean, of 10,000 students, how many ride the bus every day?
Oh, wow.
Probably more than 10,000, because we transport parochial schools.
Yeah. So you think about that, and I mean, 300, and 40 square miles that you're doing, and a lot of our country roads that, I mean, I know I live out in the country, and I mean, it gets dark, right? And this time of year when you're, and one of the things that this school's done and others have to save money is that we have a lot of bus drivers doing multiple routes, right? And that's why people see different times of school starting, because you're trying to stretch the dollar as much as you can. And so it is all done for student safety, of making sure those little ones especially are safe.
Absolutely. And we want our adults to be safe as well. But we have a lot of student drivers. I just want to add that in. And I worry about them because, and for anybody listening to this, if you're a parent of a student driver, make sure you teach them all the, roll your window down and listen, don't just use your sense of sight, try to use all your senses when you're out in those fog days. But anyways, back to the other obstacles that I would see in the district. I'm very happy about, but I will tell you, it also causes a lot of extra meetings right now. We have a lot of construction going on in this district, and you were on the board. You were a part of that when it happened, and it is an exciting time to be in East Allen, and you see the changes daily that are happening in several of our communities. We have the Leo Fieldhouse, we have Leo Intermediate, a brand new building being built. Paul Harding and EAU are both getting new wings, and we have a brand new Southwick Elementary being built. They were crowded last year. We had to move 2 second grades out, and we had to move our pre-K out of that building because we didn't have enough room anymore. So those are challenges this year, but I will tell you, they're challenges that are worth it because it's exciting to see what's going to happen for our kids in the future. And again, it's an exciting time to be in East Allen, but I will also tell you a lot of construction going on. So parents have been very great. They've been very gracious at like the routing that's happening in some of our attendance areas, because, when they drop off or pick up and we're having to reroute them. And of course, that doesn't even take into account all the road construction going on right now, which it's the time of year for it. I mean, it's summer and, you come into the fall and you got to finish projects. So, but again, transportation is definitely one of the things that's probably just because of the uniqueness of our districts that we do have a difficult time with sometimes. But I will tell you, it's always worth it because getting kids to school safe, it's what it's all about. That's what we can do.
Yeah, and it's interesting. People have asked before, well, why are we doing all this school construction? And one of it's a good thing is that this is a growing part of the county. The east side of Allen County has 80,000 residents. It would be one of the largest counties in the state of Indiana if it was just standalone. And so we are growing. And I remember looking at the statistics. I mean, Leo Cedarville, really you don't have, I think there was like maybe one excess classroom we had. You go to Woodland and they had none. I mean, so, and you talked about Southwick where we were trying to use, closets for different things because we just didn't have the space. That's a good problem to have, and it's a bad problem to have, right? Because you have to do that. And we had a number of our schools, that were built at a different era and were just antiquated. I mean, having little ones go down to a basement for the cafeteria, really just doesn't work. And so, how do we do those things? Again, in the most cost-effective manner possible, because you want to build it and not have to go back next year and redo it, right? So it's balancing all that out.
And we're also trying to avoid modulars, trailers at all costs, just because I feel keeping kids within brick and mortar is always going to be our safest avenue. And so we've gotten really creative over the last couple of years of how to maneuver students within our buildings, within our walls, just to make sure they're in the safest environment that we can create for them.
So Pat, what do you see as kind of some of your, obviously, finances are always a concern, right? But as you look at the crystal ball over the next couple of years, your biggest challenge?
So back to the COVID point, we talked about some of the implications of there. If we take a look at our incoming kindergarten class and compare that to our senior class, and you could probably find this across several of the districts if you looked, but our numbers are much lower in the kindergarten class. And I think it was because a lot of those hospitals were shut down during the pandemic, and a lot of people weren't having children because they were trying to stay safe, et cetera. So I think our numbers are down a little bit in the younger years attributed to the pandemic. So that's just one variable that it's probably just a temporary solution, because we have increased the number of residents that are eligible for school has increased over like 1,400 students over the last 3 or 4 years. But what's been a factor is the school choice and a lot of what's called the little pop-up schools that are all over the micro schools. So I'm all for choice, and I think that public education provides a lot of services, sports, the special education, the camaraderie that not every school can provide. But I think that having that options out there is something that we're going to have to be more competitive about and show the value of why you would want your child to go to East Allen County schools as far as an alternate. And I think we're up to the challenge of that. But I think that that's one of those things that we have to keep on our mind. Another thing is, as I said earlier, the Senate enrolled Act 1 and just balancing the money that we're going to be losing with property taxes in a way that we're really going to have to look at all of our expenses and make sure that there are really on the needs side of the T-chart, and we can't be spending anything on wants or frills, and we're going to be having to do some reductions. Our allocations this year for 2026 were reduced from 2025, and I would be hard pressed to see very many schools that did that. And we, the Legislative Services Agency and our demographic study had our enrollment intending to go up, and we knew that. I still cut them because I thought with the amount of revenue that we're going to be getting, I don't even want the illusion that we can spend money, because it's going to get tight in these next few years, and we really need to boil it down to the absolute needs of the districts while keeping the students first. And I think we're currently in collective bargaining right now, working with our teachers associations, and we want to make sure that every single penny that we can that's intended to go to the classroom stays in the classroom. And one of the best ways to do about that is to say no to the suggestions for spending it outside of the classroom. Now, keep in mind, safety is definitely one of the high parts of our value, and making sure that we have infrastructure that's going to provide what we need is there too. But in the end, we're here to serve students and the communities there, and we want to make sure that money gets to where it's intended to go.
Well, we are way over time. This is a topic I could spend all day talking about, because I think strong education systems are critical for the success of our community, and we're blessed, in this area to have great private schools, great public schools, and a lot of times a partnership there that people don't realize. Pat, you mentioned earlier about East Allen County School provides transportation for a number of our private schools in this part, and our Amish schools. That's right. And so that's a partnership that people don't realize that's there. But any final things before we wrap up?
No, I thank you for the opportunity, and we're always happy to tell East Allen's story. And like I said, I'm a product, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
So,
yeah, appreciate the opportunity. And if you're listening and you're in the community, we just wanted to I'd like to give a shout out to all the businesses that are supportive. We've really been blessed by the businesses that have been able to help out Allen County with donations, or allowing some of our students to serve in dual credit programs, et cetera. And just wanted to give a shout out to all the business owners and the corporations in the area for their partnership.
So thank you for watching and listening today. We appreciate it. Hope you've learned something from this, that you found this a valuable use of time. And we really appreciate Marilyn. Thank you, Pat. Thank you very much. And so we're going to wrap this episode up, and we'll talk to you soon.